It's like being a non-astrologer. I mean, we don't have a word for someone who's not an astrologer.
Look at him, he's like, oh, fixing my back, oh.
And if astrologers suddenly...
Sam Harris is a boss, and we're about to see him at his best. Clever arguments, best comebacks, we're gonna see them all in this video. Please, first, click like and subscribe below, and then we're gonna get on this right now. Thank you.
The dialogue between science and religion has gone this way. It has been one of relentless and one-directional erosion of religious authority. I would challenge anyone here to think of a question upon which we once had a scientific answer, however inadequate, but for which now the best answer is a religious one. Now you can think of an uncountable number of questions that run the other way, where we once had a religious answer, and now the authority of religion has been battered and nullified by science and by moral progress and secular progress generally. And I think that's not an accident. And the one area where religion still seems to hold its ground is now under assault by science, and it's very good that it is under assault by science. And this is the whole issue of morality and human happiness and what constitutes the good life. These are, and let me just tell you why I think this is a scientific question. Even the place of science is ultimately a scientific question. Because surely there are objective facts to be learned about the basis of human happiness. The moment you recognize that morality and spirituality and value is a matter of happiness and suffering, and that we're moving suffering in the direction of happiness, then you realize that if there are objective facts to know about human happiness, and surely there are, facts about the way that genes and ideas and uses of attention and economic systems, social structures, all of these conspire to make us happy or miserable. And again, it's true that scientific discourse is just in the beginning of addressing these issues.
What's interesting on this note, actually, is that, he says, once you accept the idea that you want to move away from suffering and go towards happiness, then science can help out in understanding the nature of happiness, in working on our economic system and our biology and our environment and our health, and see how we can use that to improve our happiness and reduce suffering. But what's interesting is actually that first claim that we want to move away from suffering and move towards happiness, that isn't a scientific claim. It's not a claim about the material world. There's no reason why we couldn't just all suffer infinitely forever. Our intuition says that it's better to move towards happiness and away from it, but that's not a scientific claim, that's a different kind of claim. So I'm curious if you have any thoughts about that below. That's kind of an example where you could say that questions around how we should operate in the world, around ethics, questions around why we do what we do, questions around how to guide our action, those questions aren't scientific questions. It's a different domain of the world. It's a different way of seeing things. And the scientific one doesn't actually help us to answer those questions until you first accept, until you get to a certain point in that domain, you can't get to the scientific one. So you'd have to say, like, I want to be physically fit for you to go into the science of nutrition first. Otherwise, there's no reason why you'd ever look into the science of nutrition, right? So the why we do something is first, and it's not a scientific thing, and then the scientific questions around what happiness is, what suffering is, how we can maximize happiness, that comes second. What do you think?
But it's not too soon to say that love is better than hate in terms of ethics. And we are studying these things at the level of the brain. Eventually we will understand the brain basis of love and hate, and the kinds of mechanisms, both cultural and personal, that ramify these states of mind. And there will be right and wrong answers, and we'll find, for instance, that honor killing is a bad strategy if you want to raise compassionate men. We know that already, but at some point we will know this biochemically. Now, the Taliban are still my favorite example of a group of people who are struggling mightily to build a society that is obviously less good than others on offer. The average lifespan for women in Afghanistan is 44 years.
Wow.
They have a literacy rate of 12%. They have almost the highest fertility rate in the world and almost the highest infant and maternal mortality in the world. This is one of the best places on earth to watch women and infants die. They also have a GDP that's lower than the world average in the year 1820. So it seems to me patently obvious that the optimal response to this situation, which is to say the most moral response, is not to throw battery acid in the faces of little girls for the crime of learning to read. Now, I think this is common sense to everyone in this room, and common sense it should be to everyone in the civilized world, except if you happen to be a bioethicist working on the President's Council at the moment. But this is also of necessity a claim about biology and psychology and sociology and economics. It is not unscientific to say that the Taliban are wrong about morality. In fact, we have to say this the moment we admit we know anything at all about human well-being. Yeah, well, the thing is, this is a trick, and this is one of the reasons why it's not a trick. I'm not a fan of the term atheism. I mean, atheism is a term totally without content. It's like being a non-astrologer. You know? I mean, we don't have a word for someone who's not an astrologer.
Look at him, he's like, oh, fixing my back, oh.
And if astrologers suddenly became ascendant in our society, we wouldn't need to invent non-astrology as a discipline. We could talk about reason and science and evidence and common sense and bullshit and put astrologers in their place. And so it could be with religion. And so this notion that Stalin and Hitler and Pol Pot were doing what they did because of atheism, because of non-belief in God. I mean, ask yourself, is too much skeptical inquiry really what's wrong with North Korea? I mean, the North Koreans are a cargo cult armed with nuclear weapons right now. They think that the food aid that we give them is a devotional offering to the genius of their dear leader. They are systematically impoverished, both physically and in terms of information. Too much knowledge, any knowledge is too much knowledge in North Korea. This is not a paradise of reasonableness. Now, all I'm advocating is that we use the same standards of rationality that we use in every other area of our lives when people start making claims about the divine origin of certain books and the virgin birth of certain people and the glorious end to history where the good people will be raptured into the sky. These are the kinds of things that we should apply pressure to. And it is taboo to apply pressure to these claims. And religious moderation, unfortunately, ramifies that taboo. One of the problems with consequentialism is that people don't think very imaginatively about what counts as a consequence. So you have the classic trolley problem that many of you have probably heard of. This is ubiquitous now in moral philosophy and in neuroscientific research on morality. You have a train coming down the track, and it's going to hit and kill 5 workmen who don't see it coming. But you stand at a switch, and you can throw the switch, and the train will take another track, and there it will only kill 1 workman. And so people are asked, should you flip that switch? Now, when asked this, 95% of people say, oh, absolutely, you have to flip that switch. You save a net 4 lives. You'd be a moral monster not to do that. But you can pose the problem another way. You now stand on a footbridge overlooking the trolley track. The trolley's coming down the track, and there's a suitably large person at your side who you can push into the path of the oncoming trolley, killing him, obviously, but saving a net 4 lives. And now, posed under this guise, 95% of people say you would be a monster to push that fat man onto the track. Now, I happen to think this is somewhat ill-posed because I think we all have an intuitive physics and we burn a fair amount of fuel wondering whether the fat man is really going to stop the trolley. But even if you finesse it and make it clear that he will, they seem different, these situations. Now, from the usual consequentialist point of view, people say, well, it's the same. You just have body count. Actuarially, this is the same scenario. But maybe it is, in fact, not the same. If it is just fundamentally different to push a person up close and personal to his death than to flip a switch. If that difference can never be reformed, then they're not, in fact, the same. If you're going to wake up with nightmares for the rest of your life because you pushed someone, but feel like a hero because you flipped a switch, those are the consequences that have to be built into our analysis. And there are many ways in which the traditional discussion of these issues breaks down.
Wow.
Even if I conceded that religion is profoundly useful, so useful as to be indispensable. People without religion will just rape and kill each other, and we don't want that. So, by all means, fill the churches and mosques and synagogues. That would not, for a moment, grant credence to the idea that one of our books was dictated by an omniscient being, or that such a being exists. All religion could function like a placebo, and I could invent a religion for you right now that would be guaranteed to be useful. In fact, more useful than any religion in existence, and you would know it would be untrue. I could, right this moment, I could invent a religion which the precept is, be kind to others, don't...
Better than every other religion? No, that's a pretty strong claim from Sam here. There's deep wisdom in these religious stories that are out there, and when you read it, it's like, whoa, there's a lot going on here I don't fully understand, and this is very profound. It's very difficult. It's hard to imagine anyone ever having written that. It was written at some point, these old stories in say, the Bible or the elements of the Quran. Like, some of this stuff is really deep, or in Buddhist literature, Hindu literature, Confucianism. It's like, whoa, this is very deep. Like, it's very hard to invent a religion that's deep enough to be profound and important. We could admit that at least, but Sam's a smart guy. Maybe he could put something together that's pretty good.
Lie, cheat, steal, or kill. And this is where it gets novel. Make sure your children make every effort to understand science and mathematics to the best of their abilities. And if you don't...
By the way, you could take that right out of Maimonides. He said that.
Okay, and if you don't do that, you'll be tortured for eternity after death by a 17-headed demon named Dexter. Right. If we could spread this faith to billions right now, we would live in a better world. Absolutely. If we could replace Islam with this faith, we would live in a better world, for starters. Okay? But that wouldn't lend the slightest credence to the idea that such a demon exists. I actually think that the frontier between science and philosophy actually doesn't exist. I think when we don't have, when a question is not operationalized, when we don't have an experiment we can perform, when we don't know how to get data, then we tend to be talking the talk of philosophy. But the moment, philosophy is kind of the womb of the sciences, and in fact it was physics at one point was called natural philosophy. The moment something becomes experimentally tractable, then these sciences bud off from philosophy. And I think every science has philosophy built into it. So there is no partition in my mind.
That's really interesting. That's very interesting. He's kind of making the argument that there's like ethical presuppositions to science. So for example, if you want to look into the science and the questions around data and experiment of putting a rover on Mars, then you first need to ask the question, why would you do that? A philosophical question. And that is like the womb for then the science to come out of it, that buds off of it, that can operate. He said it needs to be operational. That's what science is good with. But there's the beginning, it's like a philosophical one. So it's interesting that he acknowledges that relationship there.
The relevance of neuroscience is born of the fact that everything we experience, everything we care about, every instance of something mattering to us is at bottom a state of our brain. For you, a belief in the divine origin of certain books figures rather centrally to Christianity, Judaism, and Islam.
Yes.
This entails a variety of claims which are on their face at odds with science. The belief...
The dude's face, he's so stressed out. I'm surprised he's not sweating more. He's like, yes.
that Jesus was born of a virgin may be a cherished claim for most Christians. It is also a claim about biology. I mean, this is why you can't keep religion and science apart. They their truth claims cannot be disentangled. One of the embarrassing things about Christianity is it stands astride this truly contemptible history, not as any kind of departure from it. Christianity is not a religion that rejects human sacrifice. It's a religion that celebrates a single human sacrifice as though it were fully effective. And people tend to elide this kind of bizarre commitment. Moderates want faith itself to be respected at all costs. And they want the basic project of raising children to be Jews or Muslims or Christians to be respected. And in that context, it is often very difficult to honestly evaluate just how much needless human suffering is being produced on a daily basis by religion and religious belief.
Thank you, everyone. That was Sam Harris. Best comebacks, best arguments. I'm going to be coming back at you with more. First, please go down, click like and subscribe. That would be amazing. It really helps out the channel. Thank you very much. My name's Luke.